Hello. Welcome to another episode of GooseDrunks. My name is Bailey Myers, and today we're going to be reading the classic Goosebumps book, The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. Dun dun dun. To accompany the book, I thought I'd make something very Southern inspired because I guess they're on a farm or something. I have mixed whiskey with organic ginger limeade, and it is delicious. What? The rules of the game are really simple. I've changed them a little bit since the last time we played. I feel like it's sort of a living document, like the Constitution of the United States of America. So rule number 1, you drink any time that there is a stupid or unhelpful adult. Rule number 2, something legitimately creepy happens. Rule number 3, there's a cliffhanger or cat scare. Rule number 4, your sibling is being annoying. And rule number 5, the a clue rule. Anytime something is just so obviously hinting at the terror and the narrator just ignores it or doesn't notice it or is too dumb or whatever. Anyway, those are our 5 rules. Count them. Let's begin, shall we? So this story is about Jody, who's 12, and her brother Mark, who's 11, but the main character is Jody. The kids are going to visit their grandparents on their grandparents' farm for a month. And Jody is really, really excited. First person we meet from the farm is Stanley. Stanley is the hired man on my grandparents' farm. Jody notes that she and Mark haven't visited the farm for a year, but Stanley still looks the same, which makes sense because he's an adult. She also clarifies that Stanley isn't very smart. But Jody says that she and Mark always really liked Stanley. He has a quiet sense of humor, he's kind and gentle and friendly, always has a lot of amazing things to show us whenever we visit the farm. They head up to the farmhouse. Stanley exposits that the neighbor, Mr. Mortimer, doesn't farm at his place anymore. Jody asks why not, and Stanley says, because he died. Death is creepy. I'm taking a drink. So it turns out the farm grows corn, making it very much like a bajillion other farms in America. Corn is objectively the creepiest vegetable. Why does it look like that? Explain that to me. So they get out of the car and they're heading on into the house, and then Stanley says, out of nowhere, the Scarecrow walks at midnight. I read it in the book. That was legitimately creepy, but that's a drink right there. Okay, Grandpa Kurt comes out and she notices right away that his limp that he usually has is even worse. And he's leaning heavily on a white cane, which he never needed before. So Grandma invites them all in for lunch, and Jody comments to herself, not to them, that they look a lot older to her. Wouldn't it be so mean? She describes her grandparents. They look like grandparents. Grandma passes over a bowl of potato chips and says, Stanley will have to show you his scarecrows, won't you, Stanley? Stanley tells them that he made the scarecrows, and the book told him how. I'm going with a clue on that one because, oh my god, what book? Why? Ask what book at this point. It's been twice now, and it's been creepy both times. Grandpa sends the kids off with Stanley to go have a tour of the farm. So they go on a walk around the farm, and she says that far to the right of the barn, almost to the cornfield, stood the small guest house where Stanley lived with his teenage son, Styx. Jody asks, Stanley, where's Styx? Why wasn't he at lunch? And Stanley says, quietly, went to town, riding on a pony. Run, girl. That is a clue / also creepy. 2 things. 2 legitimate things to drink over. Oh my god. Like, what does that mean? So they go out into the field, and Jody sees the scarecrows that Grandma Miriam had been talking about that Stanley said he built. There are 7 of them. I don't know much about farming. That seems like too much. So she asks Stanley why there are so many. I was right. Instinct's correct. I could be a farmer. He doesn't reply. Mark whines that they've seen the farm 100 times, so why do they have to take the grand tour again? And Jody tells him to cool his jets. So they're walking around all the corn, and then Stanley pulls an ear of corn off of the stick? What is it? The stalk. I know words. And he peels it open, and I stared at it and let out a horrified cry. Dun, dun, dun. If you can say dun, dun, dun at the end, it is a cliffhanger for sure. I am taking a drink. Okay, they look at it, and super gross. It's like brown and covered in worms and just basically like bad corn. Stanley drops it to the ground in horror and says that it's bad luck, according to the book. It's like he really waffles between like dumb yokel stereotype to like Lenny from Of Mice and Men dumb. You know what I mean? Like a little too dumb for him to have a teenage son. She soothes Stanley because that's what a 12-year-old girl does with an adult man who has the mental capacity to have a teenage child. Stanley insists it's bad because the book says so. And Mark finally is like, what book? Which, okay, it took him way long enough. So that's when Stanley tells them that he's been reading a book about superstitions. He says that he has to check his superstition book to see what to do about the bad corn. It's so creepy. I'm gonna drink. It's very creepy. So Jody changes the subject to the scarecrows. She asks to see them. So they go see them. And they look super evil. like really evil. They've got like angry faces painted on. They're wearing like all black and these like big black hats and stuff. Basically just like the evilest things you've ever seen. Like literal angry eyebrows. I'm gonna go with a clue. Like, scarecrows don't need to look angry, right? Like, crows don't really recognize painted happy face versus painted angry face. It's just the, like, figure itself of being there that's supposed to work, right? Like, it doesn't need to look terrifying, does it? Ugh. So yeah, apparently Stanley makes these. Mark points out that they're pretty scary looking. And then Stanley says again that the scarecrow walks at midnight. Scary. The Scarecrow walks at midnight. Oh. So Jody finally asks what that means, and Stanley just says that the book told him how again. It's like, I know. And then Stanley tells them that the book told him how to make them walk, which is so scary. I'm going to read you every word Stanley says in order because I feel like if I take anything out, you're going to miss how freaking creepy this actually is. This is only chapter 3. I'm just saying. He says, and I will read it in a silly voice to mitigate the true and unadulterated horror. He says, I know how to do it. The book has all the words. I made them walk, Jody. I made them walk last week, and now I'm the boss. Jody is understandably freaked out, because that is scary. I stopped when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the scarecrow's arm move. Then I felt rough straw brush against my face as the dry scarecrow arm moved to my throat. Drink. But it was Styx, Stanley's son. Styx, who I'm guessing sounds kind of like Stinky from Hey Arnold, goes like, you city kids sure scare easy. He laughs at her for thinking the scarecrow moved. Stanley then says, I can make the scarecrows move. Anyway, the point is they should leave. Styx stops laughing at Jody and is just like, yeah, sure, Dad. The light seems to dim from his dark eyes, so something is clearly up. A clue. It feels so early to be drinking this much, but seriously though. They just came right out of the gate with this. He makes fun of the fact that Jody thinks that he's a hick, even though his dad talks the way that he does, and his name is Styx, so he doesn't really have a leg to stand on. Jody's like, Styx, what's your problem? And then Stanley says, be nice, the corn has ears. And no one can tell if he's joking, but clearly, like, they don't have puns in creepy witchcraft books. So then he clarifies there are spirits in the field, and that is scary, so I'm drinking again. And then Styx puts the wormy corn cob down the back of Mark's t-shirt, and Jody forgets all her troubles and laughs as her brother runs. So they have dinner with their grandparents, and it's more of the same. Grandpa used to tell a lot of jokes. He doesn't tell any more jokes. Everyone seems kind of tense. Styx seems more unfriendly than usual. Stanley was the only cheerful person at the table. He chewed his chicken enthusiastically and asked for a third helping of mashed potatoes. So after dinner, they just sit quietly in the living room, which I guess is fun. And then out of the crystal blue sky, Jody yells, "Yuck, that stuffed bear still gives me the creeps." Yes, apparently, as we have learned via this expository dialogue, there is a stuffed bear in the room. Like taxidermy stuffed, not Winnie the Pooh stuffed. It's like 8 feet tall, standing up on hind legs. I don't know why this is important. It's just setting a really scary scene. So I'm going to drink. Chapter 5 is insanely short. It's literally a page. Jody puts on her pajamas. She stares out the window and she sees the Scarecrow is walking at midnight. So, chapter 6, Jody's still watching the Scarecrows. Their arms jerk, their burlap heads lurched forward. That's very hard to say. In unison. And so she calls her brother. He comes bursting in. Mark's like, "It's definitely the wind. What's your problem?" And she's like, "No, look again." I thought they were going to do that thing where Mark's like, "I don't see anything." And then Jody goes to bed and is like, "Was I imagining it?" But instead Mark's like, "We got to tell Grandpa Kurt." So I'm actually very surprised and delighted by how early, like, we've got a confirmed monster in the book. But also I think Grandpa Kurt knows, you know? Wait, they're like moving in unison. Are they like doing a dance number? That's amazing. If I saw a bunch of scary monster things dancing in unison, that would scare everything out of me. That would be way worse. That would mean they're capable of organization and coordination, and it's like, that's not a quality I want in my shambling field monsters, you know? Anyway, I'm drinking for the dancing. So they wake up all excited for chocolate chip pancakes because I guess they temporarily decided to stop caring about the sentient dancing scarecrows. They get downstairs and shocker of all shockers, there are no pancakes. They ask Grandma Miriam what happened to the pancakes. She says, "I've stopped making them, Jody. Pancakes are too fattening." Her eyes are like on Stanley the whole time. It's clearly a hostage situation in some way, shape, or form. And for Jody, this is the, pun intended, last straw. Enough is enough. They tell Grandpa and Grandma about the moving scarecrows, and everyone immediately is like, "It's the wind." So I'm drinking for unhelpful adults here because they're being unhelpful on purpose. And then they keep trying to bring up the scarecrows, and Grandpa and Grandma keep, like, blatantly just changing the topic to literally the weather. And then Jody just kind of forgets what she was talking about. They're, like, trying to figure out what to do for the day, and she asks Grandma Miriam if maybe she wants to spend some time together, but then she, like, stops short because she looks, and Grandma Miriam's hand is made out of straw. Dun, dun, dun. So chapter 7, Grandma's like, "What's the matter?" And it turns out she was holding a broom. Her hand wasn't made of straw at all. And it's like, "Jody, get glasses, and you nerd, what the heck? Like, a broom looks nothing like a hand." Stanley takes them fishing. So they fish for a while. Stanley lets out a loud laugh that sounded like, and I quote, "har, har, har." Fishing, fishing, fishing. Nothing really happens. And then a straw scarecrow hand reaches out of the water and grabs Jody's ankle. Dun, dun, dun. Cliffhanger. I do hope it's a broom again. That would be funny. So Jody falls in the water and realizes that the thing that grabbed onto her ankle was not in fact straw. It was green weeds. And now I'm just wondering if Jody knows what straw looks like. I'm just wondering. This is my conspiracy theory. She's never seen straw before. She's super embarrassed, blah, blah, blah. Get to the good stuff. So Jody stomps onto shore away from the boat and is wringing herself dry. Mark and Stanley disappear around the corner or curve of the creek or whatever. And then she hears a footstep and then leaves rustling. And she calls, who's there? That's very scary. I'm going to drink. And then I raised my hand to my mouth as I saw the dark figure poke out from the shade of 2 tall pines. I squinted into the deep blue shadows. I saw the bulging dark coat, the faded burlap head, the dark fedora hat tilted over the black painted eyes. In case you guys were not scared enough of these choreographed sentient scarecrows, they are wearing fedoras. Possibly the scariest hat to see any human or monster wearing. Anyway, I'm drinking. End of chapter. Dun dun dun. Blah 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 blah. Chapter 9 is another one-page chapter. It's just, she screams. Mark and Stanley show up. She tells them she saw a scarecrow. Mark tells her to cool her jets again because I guess that was the big phrase that year in the 90s. Chapter 10. Stanley's freaked out. He wanders away from the kids into the woods. He's a great person to leave your young children with. He clearly has the capacity to care for them. So Jody says to Mark that she's going to go after Stanley and tells him to bring back the fishing poles by himself. And he whines about it a little, which, like, annoying sibling. Like, there's some stuff happening. They're not that heavy. They're sticks. So she saw Stanley running to his little house. She thinks she sees Grandpa Kurt moving up ahead in the barn. So she goes into the barn, and then someone closes the door behind her and locks it. And then she's locked in this dark barn, and she starts to hear this scraping sound of slow, steady footsteps coming at her in the darkness. Dun, dun, dun. Cliffhanger. So she hears the scraping sound following her around the barn, and it's very dark, and she can't see, and that's very, very scary. She jumps into a ladder and climbs up the ladder, and then she's in the hayloft, crawls to the window and sees that there's a heavy rope still tied to the side of the barn that she and Mark always used to swing down out of the barn before, which would have been cool to know about earlier. So she grabs this rope that's hanging out of the side of the barn, and she pokes her head out of the window and lets out a scream of surprise and horror. Dun dun dun. But I'm gonna drink for it because it's what the book demands. Oh my god, no. She straight up sees a scarecrow and then falls out of the roof of the barn. And the scarecrow goes like scurrying away like a rat. So she's running after the scarecrow and then runs right into Styx. Styx is like, what's the hurry? And then she's like, I think I solved the whole mystery of the scarecrows. And it's like, girl, it's chapter 12. I don't think you did. So of course she's like, it wasn't a scarecrow, it was Styx, blah blah blah. It was obviously a scarecrow. This is Goosebumps. There is never a Scooby-Doo-esque solution where it's a dude in a mask trying to save his failing business, you know? It's like, it's always a monster. Jody goes to dinner convinced that there was no live scarecrow, with Styx scaring the bejesus out of her the whole time. Anyway, Jody gives him a quick rundown of what happened in an accusing way, and then he's like, wait, my dad was scared. I've got to find him. He could do something terrible. So they go to dinner, and Stanley's carrying his superstition book with him and tells Jody not to tell the grandparents that she saw a scarecrow. Grandpa Kurt and Grandma Miriam are obviously acting like nothing is wrong. They're just being cheerful and passing mashed potatoes like back and forth to each other while Stanley reads quietly to himself from the superstition book, but not in any helpful way, so we don't know what he's saying. So they go to bed. Jody can't get any sleep at all. She's just lying restless in bed. It's nearly midnight. I've got to get to sleep. I told myself I'll be wrecked tomorrow if I don't get some sleep. Like, yeah, I got to wake up real early for all that nothing you got to do tomorrow, girl. So she's trying to fall asleep, and then she starts to hear scratching sounds, which is terrifying. I'm drinking. And then I could see a shadowy head black against the purple sky. It rose up in the window, dark shoulders followed by a darker chest. It slid over the windowsill, brushed away the curtains as it lowered itself into my room. Its feet scraped over the bare floorboards. And then I recognized him. It was Grandpa Kurt. She asks what he's doing there, but he doesn't reply. He raises both arms above me. I saw he had no hands. Clumps of straw poked out from his jacket sleeves. Grandpa, no! What's gonna happen? I'm taking a drink. Okay, chapter 15 is like, it was a dream. So, you know, not as scary as I initially thought. But still pretty scary. Like, not bad, RL. Not bad. Jody thinks it was a stupid nightmare, but I disagree. It was a very smart nightmare. So Grandma asks what they're going to do today, and then suggests that maybe they go riding. Grandpa Kurt and Stanley had saddled up Betsy and Maggie, who are presumably horses, and Jody and Mark are like, yeah, let's do it. So they're riding along the creek, then a dark figure leaps out right in front of them. Betsy lets out a shrill, startled whinny and rears back. Jody falls off the horse, which is bad from what I understand, and she sees what jumped onto the path. It was a grinning scarecrow. Dun, dun, dun. Basically, the gist of 16 is Jody fell off the horse. Mark fell off of his horse. He thinks he broke his wrist. A scarecrow hand comes down and grabs them. Dun, dun, dun. Chapter 17 ruins it. It was Stanley. Chapter 18's like, Mark did not actually break his wrist. Like, okay, Mark, get it together. I'm going to call that annoying sibling because we haven't had a lot of that this one. So Jody's like, I'm pretty sure Styx was really trying to frighten or hurt us. I'm going to figure out why. So she goes down to the guest house and knocks on the door and no one answers. So she knocks again and still no one answers. And she goes to the barn and maybe Styx is there and blah, blah, blah. She's looking around the barn for him. And then she sees a dozen torches stacked in the corner. And she's like, what are these doing here? And then she jumps and turns around and sees Styx standing there. And he says, I warned you. He warned her. Dun, dun, dun. Ah. Chapter 19, things are getting pretty crazy. Styx says, I warned you. I warned you to get away from here, to go back home. And she's like, why are you trying to scare us? And he's like, I'm not. Sorry, he's like, I'm not. But then there was a sound at the doorway, and that interrupts him. Stanley is looking for him. Styx, are you in here, he called. Styx's features tightened in sudden fear. He let out a low gasp. I've got to go. In spite of the clear earnestness in the scene here, Jody decides that it's payback time and that Styx needed a turn to be frightened. Chapter 20. So, Jody has roped Mark in, and in spite of his wrist injury, he's like, this is kind of a fun idea. So they're bonding, and that's sweet. Their plan is to dress Mark up as a scarecrow, and he's going to stand with the other scarecrows in the cornfields. And then Jody's going to get Styx and tell Styx that there's something weird in the field. And lure him out there, and then Mark would start to stagger toward him, and Styx would be, and I quote, so freaked he'd have a cow. 2 drinks for that. 2 drinks and you know why. Chapter 21, Mark's been stuffed with straw. She's leading him out to the field, as one does. There's a squirrel, it freaks them out, blah, blah, blah. Jody pulls a hat off of one of the other scarecrows, puts it on Mark's head. So once Mark is thoroughly disguised as a scarecrow, Jody goes to find Styx outside of the field. She hears a sound behind her and spins around, and she's certain it is Mark due to his scarecrow costume. The floppy hat, the bulky dark overcoat. She's like, why is he following me? He's going to ruin the whole joke. A clue, a clue. Chapter 22 starts with her trying to see if it Styx as well, but it's like wishful thinking, girl, right? She's like, Styx, is that you? But there's no reply. And it goes and like reaches to strangle her, and then the door to the guest house swings open. Styx, the real Styx, is there. He leaped off the stoop, grabbed the scarecrow by the coat shoulders, and heaved it to the ground. My freaking hero. So then Styx tells us everything that happens. So basically the gist of it is, Stanley discovered he could control the scarecrows with his superstition book. And everyone was really scared, especially the grandparents. They begged Stanley to recite the words and put the scarecrows back to sleep. But Stanley insisted that the grandparents promised not to laugh at him anymore and to do everything he wanted from now on. That is terrifying. Full Twilight Zone. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Indeed. So that's terrifying. I was right, they are being held hostage. It's so scary. So the door flies open and Stanley steps in. Stanley is still carrying the big superstition book. And Stanley's like, I must take charge. I must be the leader. I'll bring the others back to life and take control. And there's like a lot of pleading back and forth. Styx is like, the scarecrows are all asleep. Don't wake them. And then finally Stanley's like, You're sure they're not out of my control? You're sure they're not walking? And then Styx is like, yeah, I'm sure, Dad. I'm really sure. And that's when Mark, in full scarecrow costume, decided to come staggering out of the cornfield. I'm going to take a drink for annoying sibling on that one. It's not his fault, but I'm still drinking. So Stanley takes off. He just sprints away. So Styx sprints ahead, and then they sprint after him, and then finally they find them. They're standing in front of 2 scarecrows on the poles. Stanley is holding the book close to his face, and Styx is standing frozen, a blank expression on his face, a face of cold terror. Stanley, because he's a Lenny and yet has a child, brings the scarecrows to life. How did he have a child? Who slept with this man? So 25 starts with a bang. Styx is like, go, quick, run, tell your grandparents what my stupid dad has done. He didn't say stupid, but it was implied. And so Jody and Mark run, like they've been told to. And they get to the porch, and Grandpa Kurt and Grandma Miriam are standing there. Grandpa Kurt had pulled his overalls on over his pajamas. That's a look. And so they tell them that the scarecrows are walking, which doesn't surprise them at all. Grandpa Kurt is just like, did you get Stanley upset? Grandma Miriam is like, we worked so hard to keep Stanley happy. Honestly, like, can't you just, like, you know he's getting the spell from the book, right? So, like, take the book. It seems like that's a pretty easy solution. Anyway, Stanley's freaked out. He called all the scarecrows alive, but also he's freaked out they're alive, and it's like, bro, this one's your bad. Grandpa Kurt finally just takes Stanley by the shoulder and is like, what should the book say to do? And Stanley's like, I don't know. And then, after all the yelling and whatever, what's-her-face, Jody, is like, I did something that changed the whole night. I sneezed. And then Mark is so startled that he jumps. All the scarecrows are like looking at him, and she's like, Mark, put your right hand in the air. And Mark does it. And then all the scarecrows raise their right hands. And everyone realizes that the scarecrows are imitating Mark. Oh my God, that's so crazy. They think he's one of them because he's dressed like one of them. That's the stupidest thing I've ever read in my life. Oh my God, that makes no sense. That doesn't make any sense at all. The scarecrows recognize the outfit? That's so stupid. That's so stupid. But it doesn't matter because Mark is in charge of the scarecrows now. Jody's like, if you pull off your scarecrow head, then they'll pull off their heads and then they'll die. No. The issue is the scarecrows that are running amok, not the ones that are obediently following orders. Jody. Mark grips the top of the burlap bag with both hands. I sure hope this works. He gives the bag a hard tug and pulls it off. Okay, so basically there's a big lot of action-y stuff. Everyone's shouting. Styx lights the scarecrows on fire with all those torches they saw earlier. Everyone hugs. The world is quiet again. They go to dinner. They're talking about this terrifying experience they just had, and then Jody sees the bear, the taxidermy bear in the corner of the room, lick its lips, and she's like, Stanley, what chapter are you reading? Which means that they didn't take the book away from Stanley in spite of everything. That is insane. The end. I have had too much to drink. I'm going to bed now.